everybody, Josh Sigurdson, World Alternative Media here, and we are joined once again by Tim Moen, the leader of the Libertarian Party of Canada. Thanks for joining us again.
Thanks for having me, Josh.
Absolutely. So lots to talk about in Canada. We are seeing huge volatility in the oil market in Canada only months after the Liberal government took over Kinder Morgan. Can you kind of go into what on earth is going on with this incredibly volatile market lately and the government's intrusion into the oil market?
Man, it's a complex issue as to why the prices are low, but it has to do with Liberal government policies, NDP government policies here in Alberta, our failure to get adequate pipeline to get our product to market. It also has to do with an activist nonprofits, largely run by George Soros, getting heavily involved in Canadian politics. There's a huge amount of money that comes in from the U.S. from Soros-funded green environmentalist activist organizations that has put a taint on Canadian oil and painted it as dirty oil and bad for the environment and causing climate catastrophe and all sorts of things. So the price for Alberta oil is, our Canadian oil is below $10 a barrel now, which is unbelievable.
So somehow it's a big pollutant to run oil through a pipe, but it isn't so bad to run a bunch of trucks and trains that could cause actual environmental catastrophes all across the globe with this same oil. It doesn't make any sense to me, this notion that pipelines are the worst evils in the, when it comes to transferring oil from one place to another. Where do you think this misconception comes from?
Well, I think I think it comes from the media. I think it comes from people with big pockets putting out propaganda. People largely form their opinions based on what the internet tells them to form their opinion on. And so, if you're the type of person that cares about the environment and worries about things like that, then you're a mark for these people that are going to put fear in your brain about what's going to happen if we use this resource. And so it's clearly propaganda. That's the bottom line. People can't think for themselves.
Propaganda that's pushed out by the government, which happens to be the biggest polluter on the planet. Lots of, virtue signaling involved in that. But Canadians pay a fortune for fuel, for carbon, for everything. We have all become apparent livestock of the state. Meanwhile, in France, we are seeing the yellow vests rise up in the streets with signs saying taxation is theft and death to taxes as fuel taxes go sky high. If there is a tax revolution in France, yet Canada sits complacent with massively high taxes, what does that say about Canada and what such apathy may lead to in the future? I mean, what's in store for us if we don't stand up soon?
Well, I think we're going to see what's happening in France happen in Canada before too long. I mean, if oil prices remain low and we can't get our oil to market, the economy across the board is going to take a hit. And I think that one of the reasons we haven't seen these kind of protests in Canada yet is because we haven't felt the pinch like they're feeling in France. And once people feel their livelihoods, they're caught, that their living take a hit, and they're not able to sustain the same lifestyle they once were, then you're going to see revolt. And we're already seeing signs of that. I mean, there were people lined up in, thousands of people in Calgary giving Justin Trudeau the finger and having all sorts of signs about how his mom banged Mick Jagger and Fidel Castro and all sorts of things. He did not get a very warm welcome. People are getting motivated in Alberta, and I think it's going to start sweeping the country. We also saw in Edmonton a couple days ago huge protest at the Trade Center where our energy minister for Alberta was giving a talk, and people are getting riled up and they're ready to stand up and start protesting. So I don't think we're very far away from seeing the types of protests we're seeing in France.
Yeah, I may have been the first to call him a scumbag, but folks, don't let me be the last. Let's keep this momentum going against Justin Trudeau. And the Canadian deficit spending is skyrocketing, Tim. It's expected to reach $19.6 billion in 2019 to 2020, far above the projected deficit numbers. The Liberal government is claiming that the spending is to make businesses more competitive in Canada. So exactly how does government intervention lead to market competition? I'm confused.
Well, it's the same way that racking up a huge debt on your credit card stimulates the economy of your household, right? For a short period of time, everything runs great. I mean, your standard of living is raised. You're enjoying all sorts of material wealth, but eventually the creditors come calling, and you have to pay up, and you suffer the consequences. So there's always a price to pay for the spending. And it's not just the deficit spending that people should be worried about. It's I think it's close to $4 trillion in unfunded liabilities that Canadians have. So that amounts to hundreds of thousands of dollars per Canadian as soon as you're born. That's how much you're indebted to for these unfunded liabilities. So eventually that bill's going to come due, and we're going to feel the crunch. So there's a perfect storm generating right now, and it's not going to be pretty.
No, I mean, just a household debt is over $1.8 trillion. People often say, well, okay, maybe it's not as bad as the United States. Yeah, but there's a lot less people in Canada, and Canada doesn't have as much of an infrastructure to depend on as the United States, as indebted and terrible as the United States is as well at the moment. I mean, I just think that this has gotten to the point where people don't realize how indebted they are. And what comes with debt is servitude. I mean, when everyone's in debt, they are dependent on government and banks to save them from the problems that governments and banks created. It's a huge issue. Tim, do you think that there's a huge dependency problem in Canada?
Absolutely. I mean, anytime anyone feels the pinch, they turn to government. What are you going to do about this, right? And so here in Alberta, we're seeing Notley talking about buying a whole bunch of rail cars to get the oil to market. So not government interference, and her opposition, Jason Kenney, wants to slow down, put a cap on exports and oil production. And so again, centrally command economy. Those are the two options we're faced with here in Alberta, and this is what people are asking for. That they see the short-term problem is the oil price, and Jason Kenney's solution will fix that, or the short-term problem is getting our oil to market, and Rachel Notley's solution will fix that. But of course, this causes huge market distortions. Notley's solution will pull money out of the economy that would otherwise be put to other productive means. And why the heck aren't oil companies on the hook for buying rail cars? It seems to me that they're the ones that are getting this oil to market. But of course, it all comes down to this idea that this is Alberta's oil, that Albertans own this oil, that the state owns the oil. And so the state ought to manage that oil getting to market. Which of course you and I would disagree vehemently with. That oil belongs to the people that actually get it out of the ground and make it useful and get it to market. So, but people are heavily indoctrinated into the statist paradigm, and I don't know. I don't feel a huge amount of optimism. As things get worse, we're going to see people demand more and more of government. And, we're seeing this with the GM plant shut down, and all everything that people are feeling, and the bad things that are happening to Canadians. Yeah. They want more government to fix it when they're not able to identify that it was government that created much of this problem in the first place.
Yeah, it's that problem, reaction, solution, repeat kind of mentality. And it's strange that it's become commonplace to kind of almost just accept or be complacent with, policies or ideas straight out of the planks of communism. It's concerning to me that we are just, shrug it off. I mean, maybe not you and I, but the vast majority of Canadians they see the problems, they feel the problems, but they don't realize what's causing the problems. And then they ask for that which created the problems to solve the problems. It's just so perpetual.
Yeah,
Um,
it's frustrating.
it is. And, recently the Liberal government called for potentially seizing Canadian bank records to stop money laundering and criminal activity, the usual excuse for infringing on individual liberties. There was backlash, and for now, such actions are put on hold. But relate this with the bail-in regimes written into Canadian budget, and what does it say about the direction of the Canadian government is going, and the potential for a complete Orwellian technocratic state on our doorstep when the government is just casually saying, we kind of want to, seize everyone's bank records and keep tabs on every transaction that anyone makes?
Well, the politicians need to buy votes, and Trudeau is spending like a drunken sailor, and he needs to keep doing that if he wants to have the good vibes coming his way still, right? He's looking after the world. He's sending money all over the place, and that money has to come from somewhere, and it's getting in short supply. And so people that are finding ways to shelter their money and cash. I mean, obviously they are they're an obvious target for the regime. So I mean, this all comes down to a disrespect for property rights, a disrespect for individual rights, and the sense that government is there to solve all our problems. Again, yeah. This is the root problem. The problem really is culture, because the culture wholeheartedly supports this, right? They might not support Trudeau doing it, but they would support Scheer or Bernier or someone else doing it. And so the problem here is statism, not so much that it's one person.
Yeah, it's this collectivist paradigm. I mean, I often equate it to kids growing up with their parents, and they hit 20, 25, 30, and they stay at their parents' place dependent on their parents. And if their parents leave them, they are left to survive on their own. And how could they possibly do that? They don't know how to take care of themselves. And in a lot of ways, the government is a far more coercive, nefarious parent that people become so dependent on that they don't know how to live without it.
Well, that's exactly right. And it's essentially a fight between the kids who want mom to be their primary caregiver and kids who want dad to be their primary caregiver, right? And that's essentially what the modern political paradigm is. We want someone to take care of us. It's either mom or dad. Damn it, I want it to be dad, or damn it, I want it to be mom. Yeah. That's the argument we see constantly.
The only difference is that this involves, vast amount of theft. And, this is the thing, is that we are seeing something happen in Canada that we haven't seen in many years. Because, of course, there's always that idea of the lesser of two evils. And we all know that the lesser of two evils is still evil, and, it just perpetuates a problem. It's like a incremental frog boil. Conservatives or liberals, it doesn't matter. The government always grows and grows. And I wanted you to fill us in on the latest regarding Maxime Bernier, on the other hand. Whatever connections may or may not be made with the Libertarian Party of Canada, and your thoughts on this massive exodus from the Conservative Party.
Yeah, well, I think it's a positive sign. I say that tentatively. I feel like the Libertarian Party cleared a pathway for Bernier. I can't remember how many terms he was in Parliament, 2 or 3 terms. He kind of sat on the sidelines and toed the party line, and voted for war and voted against gay marriage, and voted for C-51. I didn't hear a peep out of him about the drug war. I heard every now and then some quotes about from Hayek and Mises, which were hopeful. But now he is seemingly found his center and is embracing principle. At least that's what I hope he is. He seems to have surrounded himself with a lot of libertarian and like Austro-libertarians, so some decent people. But at the same time, I think a lot of his support is coming from nationalists, right? Because it was his tweets and his rhetoric about the border and immigration and multiculturalism that seemed to really attract a lot of people to his party. So I think we're seeing and so my hope is that this is a good thing, that he hasn't explicitly come out and called himself libertarian, which I think could be a problem. I was hoping for a party merger, and it seemed like he was all in favor of that for a while, but I think I might have stuck my foot in my mouth on a radio interview when I said I wasn't a big fan of the name People's Party of Canada. But I did say,
being too honest for your own good.
Well, yeah, I mean, this is why I'm not a very good politician, Josh. But my hope was that if our parties merged, that in order for our parties to merge, first of all, it would require a vote from membership, and then the one thing that can't change in our party is our underlying principles. So our statement of principles would be there undergirding then the People's Party of Canada. And to me, that would be a win, because that was the biggest thing I wanted to see in this People's Party, was a clear statement of principles. What do they stand for? What are they basing their platforms on? Where are they going with this? What is this party going to be when Maxime Bernier leaves, or let's say he doesn't get a seat, and his tenure is done? What's the compass point of this party? And I really haven't seen that. So I think eventually it's going to come down to a clash between conservative nationalists and libertarians, and I have a feeling I know who's going to win that one, right?
Yeah, it's kind of confusing, because there's some inconsistencies that really stand out, and of course when one talks about individualism in one way, it's good to stay consistent in the idea of individualism. And you mentioned national sovereignty, but I mean individual sovereignty is one of the biggest hallmarks of the libertarian ideal, is that you as an individual can govern yourself, and I feel like there's a mixture of that within the People's Party, but then also this mixture of, government ownership of land, for example, regarding the national sovereignty, end of it. I know there's a lot of back and forth rhetoric from both parts of libertarianism in this subject matter, but I mean, it's like, well, government owns this land and can decide what can come in and can't come in, and which is kind of communistic to me, to be completely honest. I wonder what your thoughts are on the inconsistencies involved in this kind of message.
Yeah, it's a tough one, and I share a lot of the sympathies with people that are concerned about migration issues, right? And most of these issues around migration come down to poor property rights, welfare statism, and forced integration. And of course, as a libertarian, I don't support any of those things, and so if we got rid of those things, migration largely wouldn't be a problem.
Mm-hmm.
But I do appreciate the worry that people have that migration is, it's just one more thing adding onto eroding, I guess, our way of life to
Sure.
some degree. So I have some sympathy there. But what I worry about is when you have people who that's their one issue, right? Like, so I noticed Faith Goldie was kind of chastising Max after his speech in Toronto.
Mm-hmm.
Because he didn't really address immigration, and she talked to everyone in the room, and everyone in the room was there because of the immigration policies, and she was like, he better start making more noise about immigration and border control. I don't care what his other policies are, I'm voting for the person that is going to be strong on the border, right? So that's a little bit worrying.
Well, that's not freedom-minded. I mean, like, the thing is, every communist government and socialist government I could think of throughout history has had very strong borders, whether that be Stalin, Mao, Cuba, Venezuela even. It's this idea that kind of came from a lot of like the FDR school of thought and the LBJ kind of school of thought.
Well, and the other thing that is kind of, I don't know what to make of this. But look, here's a giant leviathan that barges into your home, takes half your stuff, empties out your fridge, marches your kids off to school and then off to war, slaps your wife on the ass, tells you can't have lawn darts, drive Honda Big Reds, use slip and slides, and he literally bends you over the counter and sodomizes you in front of your family. But while that leviathan is doing that, you point at someone moving from point A to point B 3,000 miles away from you and saying, you need to do something about that. And
Yeah.
or things are going to get really bad.
Exactly.
I mean, it's embarrassing. And again, like I said, I can sympathize with the idea that, that migration under a welfare state and all these things adds more problems. And I can get behind policies that, I think there's something to be said that as we repeal the state, there's maybe a correct order to do it in an orderly fashion. And maybe we start with, my platform suggestion was one that had to do with market-based immigration. And so basically, if you're a Canadian citizen, you can invite whoever you want, provided you take on the onus financially, and you take on some onus liability wise. In other words, if the person you invite goes off the rails and starts committing crimes, we're going to hold you liability to some respect, whether it's for legal fees or something else. And to me, that way, a liberal bleeding heart can put his money where his mouth is and invite as many people as they want. And if you're a conservative and you don't want anyone, you don't have to invite anyone. But at least to me, that would be get the government out of the equation to some degree, because these throwing out of arbitrary numbers, like Max scoffs at 350,000 migrants, which are identified by the Liberals, and throws out the number 250,000 is the right number. Well, where did these numbers come from? They're just pulled out of the air. They're just kind of what I feel like. This is a lower number than that number, so it's better. How do we know? I don't know what the right number is.
And Tim, I'm really glad that someone in this movement is consistent on this message, because of course we all share the concern of, the welfare state, of course, where are these people coming from? But we have to look at like that whole scale of the situation. How were the refugees created? What created them? Oh, well, the government, like even on the southern border in the United States. Oh, let's see, proxy wars in Latin American countries, war on drugs, arming the cartels, IMF loans that impoverish nations. Then people come up and it's like, oh, well, the government that did this, we should get them to stop these people. And it's just a perpetuation of government. So I think it's so important.
Yeah, and the other issue I have is this idea that nationalism is the antithesis to globalism. I totally understand people's concern with globalism, but I have the exact same concerns with nationalism as I do with globalism.
Exactly.
Nationalism is just globalism on a slightly smaller scale, and so both of those erode individual rights. And if we're going to have a government, the government should be there to protect the individual, not impose on it, and protect individual rights. I really want to see. I'd love to see the People's Party start focusing on that, but I suspect that wouldn't be a very popular message with a lot of their supporters, and so I don't suspect that's going to happen.
To believe that government can keep people from going onto land assumes that they own the land, which means that they own that which is in the land, which means that we're all livestock, and that's pretty communistic, which is an interesting thing to see coming from a lot of people on the right. I really hope that we can come to an agreement on these situations, because again, I'm not one of those people that supports a welfare state. I don't support government stealing things. I just don't support government owning all land as if they are property owners, because that goes completely against individual property rights, which also includes the freedom of movement. So I think it's great to hear you explain these things in such clear, liberty-minded details.
Well, and here's the case for optimism with the People's Party as I see it. Because the brain trust of that party, I believe, is largely Austro-libertarian and has much the same position that you and I have. My hope is that this moves the Overton window, that the people that are attracted to that party start to see some of the arguments from liberty as they have conversations with some of the leadership in that party, and hopefully that opens the door to shifting culture. But that's the case for optimism, and I hope that's what happens.
I'm pretty optimistic about it. And I mean, of course, as everyone knows, growing government isn't a solution to, or isn't a way to shrink government. It just goes without saying. There is a lot of signs that Justin Trudeau's days are numbered. Do you think it's possible for Justin Trudeau to, win another election, considering even the people within the cannabis crowd, which was a huge part of getting him elected, are insanely mad at him right now for the vast regulations and taxes they're seeing?
I have a feeling he's going to win another election. I'd like to think we had a part in that, not in Justin Trudeau winning, but I've been saying this for a while, that the only thing worse than another term of Justin Trudeau would be the Conservative Party not losing definitively. If the Conservative Party doesn't lose definitively this election, we're in for another 16 to 18 years of statism. What's needed is reformation in the conservative movement right now. I think the People's Party offers that potential of reformation, and if the Conservative Party does respectably well, even if they come in a close second, we're going to see another 16 years of statism. So I really hope the People's Party is a king spoiler and ruins the Conservative Party's chance, because that will force them to reflect, maybe shift leadership, shift direction, maybe jump on board with the PPC or something like that, and amalgamate. The PPC might be another reform party that a new Conservative Party will emerge out of, and maybe they'll combine, maybe they'll do well enough. At the end of the day, it's going to it's going to turn into another Conservative Party, and these people are all pragmatists, right? They're not principled people. This has always been, I think, where Max and I have had our biggest disagreement. I'm a big believer in sticking by principles and always referring to principles and trying to promote the principles, whereas he's more about winning votes, and he sees that as the path forward. And I think that is, that's a tempting way to go. It's the temptation of the ring of power, right? That if you just had a little bit of that power from that ring, you can make some changes for good. But of course, it always corrupts, and we see this over and over again with the Conservative Party in Canada. They grasp principle for a period of time, and then that temptation of pragmatism comes back in, because the fear of Justin Trudeau winning trumps any trumps whatever might come from a Conservative government. And so they vote against Trudeau rather in favor of principles, and we see this over and over again. I saw it in the general election. I had a lot of Conservatives supporting me, social Conservatives. They didn't like the red Tory that was in my constituency that was running. He was known as basically a liberal, and the Conservatives hated him. But I had lots of people who went door to door for me, call me up one by one and say, "Sorry, Tim, we got to vote for the Conservative, because much as we love you, we can't have Trudeau win the election."
And this is the problem, Tim. This pragmatism is practically apathy. And I mean, it hasn't worked for the past thousands of years. Why do people think it's going to work this time?
Right. Yeah. And this is the problem Max is going to face too in the upcoming election, because, while he's polling well, while a lot of people say they'd support him, when push comes to shove, I mean, these are the same types of people. Like, I'm sure I would have polled just as well as Max in my constituency among Conservatives. I would have probably been polling at about 30 or 40% among the Conservatives in that constituency. Yet I got a pittance of that when it came crunch time, when they came down to the voting booth, and they were faced with the reality of, do I vote against Trudeau or do I vote for the guy I like? They voted against Trudeau. And so regardless of how well Max is doing, it's going to be down to who they think can dethrone Trudeau. And so I'm a little bit worried that the PPC isn't going to do so well when it comes down to it, even though the momentum is building.
Yeah, see, even pragmatism isn't very pragmatic for, our individual freedoms, which is something people have to understand. This is an incremental frog boil. And the more we go back and forth with, red versus blue and, Pepsi and Coke, the longer we just perpetuate the same problem, and the bigger government continues to get, no matter what side we're looking at. Tim, we'll be seeing you in Acapulco, Mexico for Anarchapulco once again. Can you say a few words regarding Anarchapulco and why you attend this conference?
Yeah, well, it's a great conference. First of all, there's over 1,000 like-minded people. It's kind of like going to a revival meeting or something like that. Gets your juices flowing, and there's so many different workshops you can go to. I really would have liked to have attended one of the psychedelic workshops, but I felt like I needed my mind clear for the speech I was going to give, and so I was a little scared to go down that pathway. But all sorts of peaceful parenting workshops, cryptocurrency workshops, anything you can imagine that has to do with giving yourself more personal power. And that's what I really like about it. It's not so much about changing the external world as it is about changing the internal world, and getting that charge of liberty and personal responsibility that you can take and grow your own sphere of liberty. And hopefully that catches on. And if enough people do that, that's the path to liberty, I think. So I think it's a great place to go and network and get charged up. You got to go to church. Yeah, you know, when you're not preaching at the gates of hell, it's good to come back to the congregation and sing with the choir and get filled up with the spirit of liberty, I guess, before you go back out again.
Yeah, break free from the religion of government. And you know, it's a amazing event. I have to mention, I mean, this last year at Anarchapulco, within a 24-hour period, I was hanging out with the Wu-Tang Clan, experienced a 7.3 magnitude earthquake, hung out with Ron Paul, and went to dinner with G. Edward Griffin. This is just the essence of how incredible of an event this is, and there's something for everyone there. So this is where I become an ad man for a second. Check the links below. We have WHAM, promo code WHAM, save money on your tickets. But I'm looking forward to seeing you there, Tim. Thanks for joining us. Can you let our viewers know where they can follow your work and support the work you do?
Sure. Well, you can go to our party website, libertarian.ca. You can follow me on Twitter at Moen_Tim, or friend request me on Facebook, and feel free to send me messages. I'm usually pretty responsive. So yeah.
Absolutely. Well, I really appreciate you joining us again. Always very interesting conversations. It's good to see people, like I said, that are too honest for their own good and speak the truth and be consistent in the message of freedom and individual liberty. There's not enough of them out there, unfortunately, and we need to change that. So thank you for being one of those people that's changing that, Tim. And until next time, this is Josh Sigurdson signing out from World Alternative Media. Find the truth, be the change.
Hey, Josh, Merry Christmas.
Like what you see here, OM? Don't forget to check the links below. GoFundMe, Patreon. We can't do it without you. Any donation is very much appreciated, especially as we are so vastly demonetized and censored on YouTube, as these guys come in and flag all of our content as hate speech. Also, check out our Bitcoin address below, as well as on the screen for you to scan if you please. And also check us out at steemit.com. We're at Josh Sigurdson. It's a future of social media where you get paid in the upvote of your post in cryptocurrency, Steem that is. So make sure to check us out there. Make sure to join us at Anarchapulco 2019 with people like Ron Paul, G. Edward Griffin, of course, Jeff Berwick, Vid Jedlicka. So many incredible speakers are going to be speaking. It's just a massively growing event. It is something you have to see to believe. So make sure to check it out below and save money on your tickets by using promo code WHAM, that's WAM, and I hope to see you there. Also, check out our newsletter as we are getting demonetized and censored and all that. We don't know what comes next, so we have an email, worldalternativemedia@gmail.com. Send us an email with subject line YES, YES, and we will include you in the newsletter where we will continuously keep you updated. So until next time, thanks for watching, everyone. This is Josh Sigurdson signing out from World Alternative Media. Find the truth, be the change.
I'm sure you have already changed people's minds in your young age because you're involved, and I like that.
Bye.